So how much of this deficit mess is the result of Bush tax cuts? It's an old fight here. We want to get to it. Bruce Bartlett says plenty. He's former Deputy Assistant Treasury Secretary under the first George Bush and was a policy advisor to Ronald Reagan. Let me ask you about this whole thing. Bottom line, let's look at the numbers right now. We got a chart coming up. This chart shows the Bush tax cuts were responsible for increasing the debt of the United States by about $3 trillion over the last decade. Now, we have about a $14 trillion debt right now. Half of it came out since the turn of the century, since Bush came into office, and almost more than 40% of that's from taxes, from tax cuts.
That's right. When Bush took office, we had a debt of about $6 trillion, and the projections from the CBO were that we were going to run a $6 trillion surplus. So by this point, if we had done nothing, we would have paid off the debt. But we added to that about $3 trillion of tax cuts. We lost about $3 trillion of revenue because of the slower economy, and then we added about $6 trillion of spending, largely due to 2 unfunded wars and a Medicare drug benefit and a lot of other things. And so instead of paying off the debt, we ended up with about a $12 trillion debt at the end of the administration.
Well, these people, some of them clowns, not all of them, running around saying Barack Obama is a socialist. Barack Obama drove up the national debt to $14 trillion. Then they dance around in a circle about that and congratulate each other. That's not true.
No, I think the dirty secret is actually that Obama's a moderate conservative, and if I were a liberal Democrat, I'd be pretty upset.
Well, the point is, it gets back to the numbers. A $14 trillion debt, half of it's from Bush, and almost half of that is from the tax cut. Another portion is from the prescription drug bill. And the whole rest of that really is from a lousy economy under Bush and these 2 wars he came up with.
Well, that's right. The Republicans keep saying that tax cuts are the key to prosperity. Well, the 2000s is evidence that that's not true. And also, we raised taxes in 1982. They said it would be a recession. We raised taxes again in 1993. They said it would be a recession. We had booming economies in the 1980s and 90s. I think if we went back to the taxes we had in the 80s and 90s, we'd be a lot better off.
What is the argument against the kind of tax policy? Well, let's just say it again. It seems to me we had a heck of a great economy in the 90s with a tax rate for people in the higher brackets of about 39.6 as opposed to 35, right?
Right.
And yet that is the one that the rich bitch about, to use a crude term. And yet that didn't hurt the economy, and it helped balance the budget.
Well, that's right. And don't forget also that Ronald Reagan raised the capital gains tax rate to 28% in 1986, and now it's only 15%. And, of course, the wealthier you are, the more of your income comes from capital gains. Yeah,
we had last night we showed the 400 richest people in the country whose average income is $270 million a year pay about the same as a poor person pays. They pay about 18%.
That's right, of income taxes. That's right.
Whereas the middle class and the upper middle class, who think they're the majority of the country, and they actually are, they're paying a higher rate.
That's right. I don't think there's any question that we would have positive economic effects if we went back to the Clinton-era tax rates.
Why don't economists say this that you're just saying? How come I need to drag you on the show? Well, you read your column, but the fact is, just a simple math, to reiterate, we have a $14 trillion debt right now. Half it came from the Bush era. Almost half of that came from the tax cuts Bush pushed through in a partisan way. And the rest came from his prescription drug bill, which wasn't funded, and with the terrible economy and the 2 wars that he promulgated.
Well,
that's simple math there.
That's right. But in the Republican playbook, of course, the deficit is never caused by tax cuts,
wars.
Or wars. As you know, they go around saying the Bush tax cuts did not lose any revenue. A number of prominent officials, Mitch McConnell included, have said this, and it's just mathematically ridiculous.
And if a Republican gets behind a social program like prescription drugs, it's not socialism. But if a Democrat says you can't go into the ER anymore for free, you got to kick in something, which is, to me, pretty conservative. Which is Bush, the Obama health care plan basically makes everybody pay something, which sounds pretty Republican in the old days. Republicans call it socialism. They'd rather you go to the ER and get treated free.
Well,
but that's what's going on now.
Well, as you know, the Obama plan, the Affordable Health Care Act, was essentially the same thing as the Republicans themselves had been pushing only a few years earlier.
Richard Nixon pushed an employer mandate, not just an individual. He wanted the individual not to have to pay any health care costs. All bosses had to pay all the health care costs. That would have been a Nixon rule.
Yeah, well, the Heritage Foundation, much more recently than that, proposed an individual mandate, and now all of a sudden that's...
I feel like sanity's just walked in the door here. Bruce Bartlett, it's so great of you to come on the show. Bottom line, now that I realize you're smart and you have all the numbers, give me 2 seconds. Any way to solve this kerfuffle we're in right now, this debt ceiling thing?
I think at this point, there's nothing that can pass the House of Representatives. I think the ban
because it's too much of a zoo.
Yeah, I think a good chunk of the Republican caucus is either stupid, crazy, ignorant, or craven cowards that were desperately afraid of the Tea Party people, and rightly so.
I love it. Thank you. I can't add to that, Bruce Bartlett. But you use tougher words than I usually use. I just say a zoo.